Hello everyone, and welcome to another Florida Native Plant Society Lunch and Learn. I'm really excited today. We have Linda Davis, our Executive Director, and Lydia Cuni, our presenter. Take it away.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all for joining us. We're really pleased to have you here. Just wanted to remind anybody that's here today that our annual conference is coming up very soon. We're 4 weeks out, which we're very excited about. So we have a virtual conference, which is the last weekend in April, followed by 3 subsequent field day weekends at different locations around the state. I'm going to be at the Naples field day, so if you're there, I'd love to meet you all. I know Valerie's going to be at the Sanford one, and Lily, our other member of staff, will be at the one based around Tallahassee, which our chapters are hosting each of those field days. I encourage you to book your place as soon as you can. There are limited places, and there's some really exciting programming happening at those field days. So without further ado, let me get on and introduce our speaker today. Lydia Cuni is a South Florida-based botanist. Her hometown is Hialeah, Florida, which is the 2nd most populous city in Miami-Dade County. She is a MS graduate from Florida International University and is a field biologist at Fairchild Botanic Garden. If you haven't been there, I encourage you to go visit Fairchild. It's an amazing place. She focuses on rare plant habitat conservation management. So today she's going to be talking to us about her conservation work on 5 endangered pine rockland plants. Really grateful to have her here today. I'd like to hand over to her now. Thank you so much, Lydia.
Thank you, Linda. Thanks, Valerie. I'm really excited to be speaking to the Native Plant Society members today for the Lunch and Learn. I'm a Native Plant Society member as well. I'm going to share my screen now. That was a really nice introduction. I'm going to be speaking about the Fab 5 project, which was some work that we did, some conservation actions for 5 South Florida endemic plants. That was a really nice introduction. Like Linda said, I'm from Miami-Dade County. I grew up in Hialeah, and nature just kind of grew on me. I pursued a biology degree in Florida International University, and also my master's in environmental studies. And some of my work interests are GPS mapping and monitoring of rare flora and the rare habitats of South Florida, and also working with native plant and habitat management and restoration, including translocations of plants as part of restoration. I'm also interested in native plant phenology, demography, and we also do some horticulture as part of the work with the garden, of course. And I'm interested in that. Some acknowledgements with this project before I get further into the work. I have to, of course, thank the rest of the Fairchild conservation team and the Fairchild volunteers that work to make this happen. And this is our website here. I also would like to thank the U.S. Fish and Wildlife staff and volunteers that help us in the fields, as well as Miami-Dade County Environmentally Endangered Lands Program and Natural Areas Management for the county, and Zoo Miami Conservation and Research staff, because some of this work that we did happened in Zoo Miami Pinelands. And everyone helped in some way with access permission, and they helped with seed collections, installations, with aftercare and monitoring so many times, which you'll see in this presentation, a lot of data collection. So this is the 5 species we worked with. And again, this was a proposal towards the conservation of 5 federally endangered and endemic Pine Rockland plants. The funding was from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Endangered Species Act, and it was administered by the state of Florida's Threatened and Plant Conservation Program. So these are the 5 species. I'm going to go into further detail about them now. First is the Florida Brickellbush Mosier's false bone set, Brickellia mosieri. It's a perennial herb in the Asteraceae plant family, and being a perennial herb, the plants may senesce to an underground tuber in the dry season. It's part of their life history. They have yellow flowers. They are disc flowers. They can be 9 to 13 in an inflorescence. And they can be flowering and fruiting at the same time. And here on the right is a plant with all ripe seeds, and the fruits, the seeds are wind dispersed, achenes, like many other asters. And this Brickellia mosieri is found solely on the Miami Rock Ridge. It's only in Pine Rockland habitat that remains there in Miami-Dade County. The next species is Carter's flax, Linum carteri variety carteri. And depending what taxonomy you use, some people would rank this as a species now as Linum carteri. But this is an annual herb in the flax family Linaceae. And the flowers are really showy. They can be 1 inch wide. They're showy compared relative to their size, which is a really small plant. But in the middle here, you can see one holding lots of fruits. The fruits are capsules, and they could have up to 10 seeds. And this plant also is only found on the Miami Rock Ridge, and it grows in really sunny habitats. And it could also grow in marl prairie habitat remnants. And it doesn't need to be in intact Pine Rockland, but it can also grow in areas that the limestone has been impacted in some way, and also restored pineland areas. The next species is sand flax, Linum arenicola. This flax is different because it's a perennial herb, but it's in the same family, Linaceae. The flowers are much smaller. They're only about 1/4 inch big, wide, and the fruits are also capsules, and they can hold up to 10 seeds. Here, the capsules are much, much smaller. And this only grows now on the Miami limestone formation, which the Miami Rock Ridge is part of the limestone formation. But this limestone also extends into the lower Florida Keys and is part of Big Pine Key and Lower Sugarloaf Key. Those islands are part of the Miami limestone formation, which is the Miami Rock Ridge and those lower Florida Keys. And it also grows in areas of limestone that are not intact, but that have been, kind of ground up. They kind of been disturbed in some way, not just regular Pine Rockland that you might see. So now, since the sand flax is a species that grows both in the mainland and the lower Florida Keys, the 4th species is the Keys wedge spurge, Euphorbia deltoidea subspecies serpyllum. This is in the spurge family, Euphorbiaceae. So the flowers are arranged in a cyatheum. They're quite small flowers, small capsules. And this grows in the Pine Rockland habitat, and only on Big Pine Key is the historic locations for it. and it grows in full sun, and it can grow in the little crevices of the rock. And the fifth species is the big pine partridge pea, Chamaecrista lineata variety keyensis. And I think depending on some taxonomy, some might consider this a Chamaecrista species as well. So some might consider it Chamaecrista keyensis as a distinct species. And this is a perennial herb in the legume family Fabaceae. So the fruits are multi-seeded legume pods over here on the right. And this is found in Pine Rockland habitat on Big Pine Key. And it also historically occurred on other islands like Cudjoe Key and islands like that, like No Name Key, for example. So the objectives for our project was to first do seed collections for these species, and they were going to be a genetically representative for the 5 taxa. That was what we aimed to do. And we also were to enter these seeds into long-term cold storage, which is seed banking. And these seeds also became the source material for recovery actions such as outplanting. And that was our second objective, was to do plant reintroduction and augmentation for these taxa. And part of that is to identify and assess your sites for the potential translocation for these 5 taxa. And that also includes planning the supplies that you need, transporting them, and also setting this up in the field. And sharing some pictures here of seeds of Brickellia, and just an example of a site where you might do an outplanting. Here are the results of that project in the seed collections and banking objective. Here I'm showing all the seeds that we banked at the Fairchild Seed Bank and also at NLGRP, that stands for the National Laboratory for Genetic Resource Preservation. This is the USDA Seed Bank in Fort Collins, Colorado, and they're a repository for seeds nationally, and especially for endangered plants. So as part of this work, we grew, so I want to mention that we grew out plants and we collected seeds at the Fairchild nursery. And so that added to some of these quantities. So for example, the plants that we had of the Florida Brickellbush at the nursery were quite productive in their seeds. And so they produced about 10,000 seeds at the nursery. And so we banked those. And so that's why we have such a large quantity there. And we did the same for Linum arenicola. We collected some seeds, and for Chamaecrista as well. We collected seeds from plants at the nursery. And here's a look at all the seeds for those species. This is the Florida Brickellbush, the Carter's flax. This is the sand flax. This is the big Pine Partridge Pea and the the Keys wedge spurge. Once we had those seeds, we can do germination trials and grow plants out, and also do experiments. We tracked the germination of these Linum carteri at the nursery. We grew plants out even to flower. And we also, these are the Brickellbush that I mentioned that we bulked about 10,000 seeds from. And they germinate they germinate up to 60% at the nursery, the seeds. So they're very amenable to cultivation, this Brickellbush endangered plant. The plants, we also started them for translocation. So some of these Brickellbush were outplanted, and I'm going to be talking about those that work too. This is a table showing all the translocations that we did for the different species, just a summary. A lot of the work we did was for many species at one site, for example. So we worked with Brickellbush and Carter's flax and sand flax at Rockdale. And we also worked with the big Pine Partridge Pea and the Keys wedge spurge and sand flax on no-name pea. And we carefully tracked all that information, and I'm going to be talking about those results shortly. And when we were doing these translocations, we had objectives for this work, and we were trying to develop a better understanding of the outplanting techniques and the best practices for these taxa, and to also understand the use for these taxa in a restoration context and setting, and also understand the ecological needs for these taxa, how to establish them from seed or from outplanting. And some of the pros and the pluses to do this work is that there was ongoing restoration and management of these sites, and there was strong manager support as well. And there was lots of volunteers that were very dedicated to help conduct this and to do monitoring. And this is some more behind the scenes looking back at preparations for the outplanting. And this is just the preparations for Rockdale, for example, the Brickellia germinating, the Brickellia being transitioned into pots. These sand flax seeds, Linum arenicola, this is just a picture of them germinating, but we did not use these seedlings for the outplanting. We used these plants in these square pines. These are the ones we outplanted. Here, Linum carteri and plugs, and on the day of, all the tools and the plants loaded up in the back of the car, ready for Rockdale. So the first results I'm going to talk about are the Brickellbush, the Brickellia field seed germination. We installed a total of 480 seeds in 2 areas, rocky or sandy. And after 1 week, 184 seedlings had germinated. And we track very closely once a week. And unfortunately, a drought the next week had impacted the survival. And we can see that the rocky seedlings with the square box, they survived better than the sandy plots. The plots in the sandy areas, just the seedlings did not survive. And after 1 year, there was 10 seedlings surviving, but they were very, very small, and their seedling growth was very, very, very slow. And we're going to be going back to monitor this in May. And so I'm really excited to see what's out there 4 years later. And a lot of this will be getting monitored in May. So the next is the Florida Brickellbush outplanting, and there was 57 plants in total like I said, a rocky area and a sandy area. After 1 year, the survival. Oh, I would want to mention that at the time of planting, all the outplants were reproductive. They were pretty much all flowering. And so after 1 year, the survival was high for both areas, for rocky and for sandy was moderately high, very high. And after 2 years, we can see that the sandy survival for the Brickellbush is quite higher at 81% than the rocky survival. And we also tracked when the plants were flowering, and they flower. Here we just missed the flowering, but they're mostly flowering, the plants that are surviving, majority flowering. And we observed recruitment of Florida Brickellbush. After 1 year, we surveyed for seedlings beneath the plants, and we found 59. Here's what they looked like at that time. They were pretty small. And after 2 years, in 2021, there was still about the same number, 60, but 21 of those were new. And we're going to be looking at in May, which will be 4 years. Next is the Carter's flax seed germination. We installed 240 total seeds. And after 2 weeks, a total of 33 seedlings had germinated. And after 2 weeks, 15 of those had survived. And that same drought that impacted the Brickellbush impacted the Carter's flax seedling survival too. But they kind of were still germinating up to 9 months. They continued to germinate. So that increased the survival here because new plants were coming in. And after 1 year, there was 9 surviving seedlings, and 6 of them were reproductive. And that's really cool to see one of the seedlings flowering in the seed plot. And those seedlings being reproductive, they were holding a total of 16 fruits, and that means it could have been 160 seeds that they were now spreading into the area. We also outplanted the Carter's flax. Here's one a couple days after planting, kind of wilting, but we did a lot of aftercare, and we outplanted 18 of them, and after 1 month, 7 were still alive. And at that time, after 1 month, 3 of them were reproductive, which is 43% out of the surviving ones. And after 3 months after the outplanting, 4 of the outplants had produced 13 fruits and about 130 seeds. And this is the area we outplanted them in the orange triangle. And at 6 months later, we saw 6 recruits. And that was this area in brown. That's where we started to see seedlings spreading. And after 2.5 years, we've counted a total of 28 recruits in this area. So 28 new plants. Going on to sandflax, we outplanted 6 of them. All of them were reproductive at outplanting. After 1.5 years, we recorded 2 seedlings had popped up underneath an outplant. And after 2.5 years, those recruits are still there, even though now after 2.5 years, the outplants unfortunately haven't survived. None of the outplants survived, but there are still these 2 recruits. And we're going to be doing some monitoring in May. And I have some really interesting news that there will also be augmentations for this sand flax population in the next couple years. We also did some seed introductions for the sand flax. We introduced a total of 900 seeds at 2 different times in June and September. And the seeds really did not start germinating until January. And that's when we saw about 65 seedlings in March. We saw 65 seedlings had germinated up into March. And the dry season was really harsh on them. Not many survived, and that's why we see this sharp decline. And after 1 year of the seed introduction, about 4 seedlings survived. And the sand flax is a perennial plant. So after 3.5 years, these 4 seedlings were still there, and they were now 4 reproductive plants. And this will also be part of the augmentation effort. And the seeds that we introduced, some of them also became reproductive, as you see here in the plot. And we did a seed introduction as well in the Keys. Now we're heading down to the Keys to No Name Key. We introduced a total of 320 seeds into 2 different areas with 16 total plots with 8 plots per area. And one area did very, very poor, and in general, Spanish Channel, just there was low survival there, and the only remaining plants are in another area called Quarry Side. And like the experiment in the mainland, we started to see only germination in January, even though we put the seeds out in August. And the peak germination was 118 seedlings. And after 1 year, there was 7 plants surviving. And after 3 years, we found 13 plants surviving. And we think that 10 of those are recruits. So that means that the surviving plants had produced seedlings. And this is going to be part of an augmentation effort as well. So here's sand flax reproductive in the seed plot. Going on to the big Pine Partridge Pea outplanting, we did 48 plants. 18 of them were under these cages. Over here, there's kind of a grid pattern. This is a cage that was put on top of some plants. And 30 of them were loose and uncaged. And we did this to survey and monitor for the key deer that lives on Big Pine Key, to see their impacts of herbivory. And we found that the herbivory is a really big impact on the partridge peas. Just the day after outplanting, they had already kind of chewed on the plants a bit and kind of defoliated them, browsing. And we have found that the cage plants, after 3.5 years, they survive much greater, and they fruit much greater than the plants that were uncaged. And something really, really cool is that after 3 months, we had already started to see recruits after 3 months, because the 48 plants that we put, out were almost all of them were reproductive and flowering and fruiting. And after 3.5 years, we have 220 recruits from this outplanting. And here's one of them. This is a recruit because it has a toothpick, and the recruit itself, the seedling, is already reproductive. So it's not even a seedling, but it's a recruit from the outplanting, already reproductive itself. So it was, we're going to be monitoring this at some time later this year, much later. We also conducted a seed introduction of the big Pine Partridge Pea. It was really quite interesting. We introduced seeds of different treatments. They were frozen or fresh, scarified or desiccated, different treatments. And we tracked really carefully the emergence, and the scarified seeds were very quick to emerge. They emerged after 1 week, and their survival was actually, their emergence was really stable. Once whichever seeds were gonna germinated, but the other ones were more stable, and they had a peak at around 6 months was a germination peak. And there was a total of 331 seedlings at that time, which is an average of 46% germination. And after 1 year, there was 42% survival, and that's 140 plants, 140 seedlings, and 9 of them were reproductive. And you can see this is a reproductive plant in one of the seed plots. And we use that mesh to kind of stabilize the plot. So we use U-hooks, and this also deters any raccoons messing with the plants. But this was a plot that did not get eaten by the deer at this point. And after 3 years, in 2022, just now in December, we counted 35 living plants from this seed introduction, and 9 of them we think are recruits from the seed introduction. So one of the seeds introduced produced seeds, and this is one of the seedlings. Now going on to the Keys wedge spurge, we introduced seeds of this species. We introduced 320 total seeds into 16 plots, 20 seeds per plot, just like all the other ones. And after 1 month, 66 seedlings had emerged. And that's 21%. And flowering and fruiting of the seedlings that had germinated, it started happening after 3 months. So it happened fairly quickly, and they were popping out of the plots, and we removed the mesh pretty quickly to let them grow out. And you can see all the flowers on these seedlings here. And they started to grow into one another, and it was kind of hard to keep track. And after 1 year, we had 35 surviving seedlings, and the seed introduction had gone on to make 54 recruits. And so this is me looking for recruits, little seedlings, and these are new plants that sprouted up in the introduction area. And after 3 years, we counted a total of 84 plants still surviving in the introduction area. So in summary, for this project, the Fab 5 Conservation Actions Project, we preserved genetically representative seeds for these endangered species in seed banks. We visited many of the populations and entered those seeds into the Fairchild seed bank and then the National Seed Bank. And we learned how to grow the Pine Rockland plants and how to germinate their seeds, and try to learn how to do this at the best rates. If they needed to be desiccated, or if they were, if they were better as fresh seeds. And then we also tested the translocation methods for the species. We tested outplants and we tested seed introductions, and we created many new populations for these taxa, these species, in recently restored Pine Rockland areas. And as you can see from the information I shared, is that there's active recruitment of seedlings for all the species at nearly all the translocation sites. And so with that, I want to thank you for your attention and open it up for any questions.
Thank you so much, Lydia. We don't have any questions yet in the chat. So I have a question about the cage size for the partridge peas. How tall is that cage?
They're pretty big. They were about longer than 3 feet and about 2 feet wide. And they're about less than 2 feet off the ground. So it's a short cage over the plants.
I also have a couple of questions, if that's okay. Just around the kind of practicalities of it, I suppose. I'm interested to hear if there were any particular challenges with seed collection. Obviously I know it's kind of a little bit of a challenging environment, potentially, I guess, out somewhere like No Name Key, and just to hear about any of the challenges that you had with any of that work.
So it was kind of fortuitous timing, honestly. The seed collections were planned so that we kind of planned it around the phenology of the plants. So we aimed for that. We're lucky to have that kind of information available, and we went out to as many sites as we could a week. I mean, we did not stop to be able to do this in that amount of time. Mm-hmm. So we really planned out and scheduled as much as we could to be. So the challenges were really making sure we had volunteers to help us in case we couldn't get down into the keys, for example. So our keys volunteers were really vital to help us make sure that some little extra monitoring, and they helped us water to that outplants.
Yeah, that's always an important part. And so, because what about the timing? Because obviously you're collecting a variety of different species there. Does it all end up happening at the same time? Is it, that I know with some of the ones that we work on, everything seems to all occur in the same. So resource-wise, it's hard to juggle sometimes.
Yeah, I was definitely juggling the species every other week. So it was Brickellbush. Brickellbush was kind of fruiting in the late summer, and we were also getting the last of the sand flax. And then because the flax is really in the spring and summer is when you can collect those. So we kind of just aimed for the late season fruiting plants first, and then the next spring we did the Carter's flax and more sand flax. It was kind of widespread from one late summer to the next spring.
Excellent. I'm also interested to know about any of the other kind of partnerships or partners that are involved. I know you thanked a couple of people at the beginning of your presentation, but just wondering, for example, you mentioned keyensis, and are there any groups that you're partnering with on any of their work to share that kind of data?
So the keyensis refuge is a U.S. Fish and Wildlife refuge, and their staff helped. And we also had U.S. Fish and Wildlife Coastal Program staff help, that they're based in the Keys. And they came out in the fields, especially for the installation, to help put out all the plants out and put out all the seed plots and put the seeds. It was really a big effort, those installations. And we did collaborate in the mainland on Rockdale, with an environmentally endangered lands preserve. And the installation date that we chose was actually a work day that was going on, that they had set up the volunteer work day. And then we brought over some Brickellia plants for the volunteers to plant. And so there was lots of hands to help with that effort.
Excellent. Thank you.
So we have Leslie McConaughey, just says, Lydia, hello. I don't know if you know her.
Hey, Leslie. Yes, she's obviously Native Plant Society member. She's an active in the Dade chapter, and she's also a Connect to Protect member, which is a Fairchild program.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm going to hopefully get down and visit with the Dade chapter fairly soon. So that's something I'm really looking forward to. I've got some good connections in your area, so I'd love to come and visit your program. That would be amazing.
Nice, thanks. We had a conservation project too with native milkweeds, and we can show you too some of the plants that we still have.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you.
So one thing that I'm surprised nobody's asked about, but I wanted to see if you would be willing to talk about your potting mix or seed mixes, seed protection, the little PVC, it would look like PVC circles.
Yes. Yeah, I can even put them back on the screen.
And which has been, why you're using which, in what cases, what you prioritize in terms of your approach.
Yeah, we definitely wanted to isolate the seeds and have them kind of secured, and be able to track them really closely in a contained area. And we wanted to secure them too, and make sure that there would be no little wildlife hands or human hands messing with the plants, messing with the seedlings. So everything was affixed together with a metal U-hook, and so that we hammered that into the ground, and so everything was pretty secure. Here you can see the U-hook, and we can track seedlings really closely there. And we use toothpicks to mark when seedlings had started to germinate. And sometimes it was easy to put a U-hook, sometimes it was not in this rock, but we got it done.
And so when you're doing the seedlings, not just outplanting with seeds, I mean, not just putting seeds on the soil and then protecting them, but it looks like you have maybe some coconut coir there.
So at this time, and we were using, it's something called fine turfus. And it's this clay product that has good drainage, but also holds some moisture for the seed germination. So that's what we were using at this time. But now we just use regular potting mix. It's totally fine. And then we were potting them in a mix of some turfus, but instead of being fine turfus, it's kind of chipped, and it's kind of chipped pieces of this clay. And so adding drainage to the potting mix, because these are pine rockland plants, they're very drought tolerant, and their roots do need some extra air. And the sand flax also was in a little bit of an airy mix with some turfus and perlite, and maybe some, I think that's about it, just some more coarse turfus. Yep.
Awesome, thank you. So I know you showed all of this data for us, and which was really great, but if you wanted to summarize it, like if you were going to do this again and just maximize the amount of plants that were surviving at a restoration site, for each species, which method would you use?
Yeah, so plants seem to do really well. They survive and can set seed pretty quickly, even for the annual Carter's flax. That's an annual, so some people would not say to outplant it, but just to try seeds. And we saw that the recruitment happened pretty quickly with outplants. And seedlings take some time to mature in the field. So if you can use plants, that's the best way. But definitely one species that stands out as being the best to do with seeds, definitely the sand flax is very possible to do with seeds, because the ones that do survive, they are reproductive, they're perennial, so they'll be surviving and reproductive. And the keys wedge spurge is very, as we saw, it was pretty quick from seed to produce some recruits. So the seeds is very, very possible. Now, the seed collection for that species is very, very tricky. The seeds, this plant, the deltoid spurge, it grows along the ground, very, very small plant, very small fruits. And so we had those volunteers in the Keys. They very much helped us with the seed collections. They bagged the capsules and would go back every so often and check if the seeds were ready. They collected the seeds for us, and then we met them and picked them up, or they mailed them. And those were the seeds that we used on the introduction to no name tea.
Well, Linda, do you have any more questions?
No, I don't think I do. But it's really exciting work. Thank you for your presentation.
Yeah, it's something I'm one of the things I'm passionate about, because it was one of the first projects that I did as part of my work as a field biologist with the team. And it's nice to go back and continue monitoring. It's really important to keep track of the project. So we have a date planned in May to do that for the mainland species, because
right.
that was when it was first done in May.
I mean, I guess that's the only other question is, what else, other than that, what else are you working on?
I bounce around different county preserves. So right now, for example, the next 2 weeks, I will be doing some resampling of some transects that were installed as part of a vegetation monitoring study. So that's what I'll be doing mostly for the next 2 weeks. Also, some seed collections are planned, because some species are fruiting now in the spring. So that's also on the calendar. but really working really closely with species sometimes, and when they're fruiting and during a project. We have a similar project going on now, kind of continuing endangered species collections and translocations.
Fantastic. Thanks.
And also, maybe I'll see you at the Sanford Field Days, the conference.
Yes, I had to purchase. I really want to go.
Cool. All right, well, if that's it, thank you so much for your time today, and then, of course, all of your work on the native plants of Florida, and specifically the rare plants of South Florida.
Thanks for having me.
And have a great weekend, and see you next month. No, in 2 months. See you in 2 months.
Yes,
Thanks.
and I'll be at the conference virtually too.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, great. Fantastic.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm loading up everybody into Whova today. Everybody that registered over the past week, so you can start interacting with each other, and Lydia as well. Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Valerie. Thanks, Linda.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.